Hello, it's Zoe, and welcome back to the show. My question for you this week is, what if we had a declaration of interdependence? How might this change our leadership? Let's find out. On Planet Human today, exciting news. The world's first 3D printed hotel will be available for people to book in shortly. It's built by none other than by the Bjork Ingels Group. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And it's the big group, of course. And I've been following them adamantly for ages now because they're the inspiration behind some of the world design aspects of my novels. So Terra Blanca, Insurrection, is based on one of the designs that Big has put out there for a floating community out in sort of the Asian waters. I can't remember exactly where it is, but it's a model that I use to build that look at the future. What does it mean when we have to build communities that are floating, man-made islands? Very cool. They also, this is what happened after I put out the book, The Olympus Project. I didn't know this, but they have been signed up by NASA to print a first community on the moon called Project Olympus. I know, right? I sent them a book, haven't heard back. Anyway, they're very cool. So they're well into reimagining the future of built environment for humans, including off planet on the moon and on Mars, but right here, right now in Texas. Should be available from 2026 to book in. So go take a look. On Planet Zoe, we are getting close to the end of the year, and I am getting ready to go on holiday to visit my folks in Montreal, my sister in New Jersey, and then off to Japan for plenty of skiing. So we're going from the hotness, the heat of Australia to the coldness of North America and the Northern Hemisphere in Japan, which should be a nice reset, a really good time to connect in person with my family and to have a bit of downtime. In the meantime, I'm taking a copy of Olympus Rising with me to show the folks and to share with the people across the planet over there. You should get a copy for yourself too. I can sign it for you if you buy it off my website or get it on Amazon for wherever you live, because shipping from Australia is nutso. Okay, that's it on Planet Zoe. How might we and what if? What if we changed power structures in workplaces? How might we transform the way that we work and wield power together? Traditional power structures are very hierarchical, represented by a triangle, which is kind of a command and control kind of thing, with one person at the top and everybody else underneath them. It's got some uses because that command and control can be very effective in emergencies and in crisis moments. And yet it's got a lot of disadvantages because we use power to reinforce the hierarchy and status to reinforce that. What if we use circles instead of triangles to build new organizations? What I mean by that is that when we share power, more collective with it, more collaborative with it, it changes the aspect of how we get things done. It's more about networks and relationships than it is about status and hierarchy. How is this possible? How might we get things done? I don't think we need to throw the triangles out with the bathwater. I think we need to keep some authority in place where there is somebody who is at the top of the triangle executing on particular decisions. I think that's important for accountability and momentum. And yet we can actually work on building bigger and better circles in our organizations. How do we go about doing that? Well, as leaders, we focus on building the power of others and we share power, all of us become more powerful. What we don't want is to squash the people at the bottom of a triangle to keep them powerless in order to keep us at the top of the triangle with all of our privileges. That is the corruption of power. That's not what we do. That's not what we want. We want to actually increase our state of abundance, our state of resourcefulness, and harness as many brains as possible. We only do that by building the power of the individuals around us so that all of us are lifted by the tide, the rising tide of shared power. When we share power, we all grow stronger. So we want to have more circles and less triangles in the workplace. What do you think? It's tea time in the office kitchen, and my guest today is Anders Indset. Ooh, He is a very interesting fellow. He's a Thinker's 50, recognized as a very important philosopher. He is considered to be a business philosopher, and he's an author of some amazing books. And his latest one, The Viking Code, is what we talk about on the show today. He is Norwegian born, and he's very much interested in looking and exposing and sharing the Norwegian or the Nordic philosophy of how we approach success and teamwork. So without further ado, here's Anders. Well, it's tea time in the office kitchen, and all the way from Frankfurt, we have Anders Indset.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome. I don't think I've had anybody from Frankfurt on the show before, so that's pretty exciting. But even more exciting is to talk about your latest work. And when I got sent the Viking Code to have a look at, I thought, oh yeah, this is going to be about saunas and cold baths. And it wasn't. Or it's going to be about Vikings slashing each other, because I'm obsessed with the Viking shows as well. And it wasn't that either. In fact, it was a whole manifesto about a different ethos and mindset that can take us forward into the future, not only for team performance, but for actually transforming a huge part of society in terms of education, politics, and the economy. So, wow, I had to have you on the show as a result of that. So let's start with first principles, Anders. What is the Viking Code?
Yeah, I think you pretty much summed it up. It's a philosophy for in German we would say Lebendigkeit, the vitality of life. So I've been observing the fact that we have built an optimization society built on knowledge, basically having progress for the past 50 years, driven by the economy. But by doing so, we have become very reactive. We are driven by outside forces, and we lose the sense of Lebendigkeit, the liveliness, the vitality. And we have tied success criteria to all the KPIs and the measurements that are, comparison to the outside world and gold medals and fortune and fame. So I was very curious about how my Norwegian countrymen all of a sudden had risen to the top of all these individual sports that has nothing to do with snow and colds, as plunges and saunas, but basically some of the biggest sports there are, like running and football, soccer in Europe, and I was very curious how that came to be, because Norway is not a country of high performance. We don't value that, but we value nature and Lebendigkeit. So I was very curious about the formula behind it. And when I started to dig into the topic, I realized that they're not only the best at their game, but they're also the most liked. They are team players. They value collectivism. And that to me was a very interesting narrative, because what seems as a contradiction, how to have both individualism and collectivism, that to me was very exciting. So I started to write about how to build a high performance culture that is actually rooted in values. And that was the story. It has some historical Viking elements to it, but the modern Viking is not out there to kill and conquer.
Thank goodness.
But yes, but and I think we see that also with the upcoming election, when you see Tim Walz coming out of the state of Minnesota as a Viking who lived in Nebraska, and he values the effort, the activation, the action, but he also puts the ethos of the team and the collectivism. And I think that still appeals to a lot of people. And I think that's also something that is very valuable for the US at the moment, where we have a society built on individualism. The Declaration of Independence now could move into some kind of declaration of interdependence, that we understand that we are all in this together, and division is not a good place to be in times of climate and the rise of exponential technology. So the result was, as you said, a philosophy of life, but also some tangible takeaways on how to build a high performance culture. So that's the Viking Code, the art of science of Norwegian success in a nutshell for you.
And it is very exciting. I like this tension between individualist and collectivism. And when I put a leadership maturity developmental model over that, I'm like, wow, that is, from an evolutionary point of view, a social evolutionary point of view, that's quite a tension to manage, because in developmental models, leadership development models, we tend to swing between individual focus, and then the next stage is collectivist, and then we swing back to an individualist stage, but amplified into a broader uh, field of view, if you like, a greater complexity and greater concern in the individualist side, and likewise swinging back to collectivism, greater capacity and concern. So the fact that the Norwegian code, the Viking code, embraced both of them, I thought, well, that's kind of just cuts through the whole developmental model and embraces it holistically. So maybe it's a super advanced code. Do you think it's an ancient code, or do you think it has been modernized and adapted for where we are now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think historically speaking, coming from the villages of the ancient Vikings, it was not always evident who was the leader and the boss in the group. And it was also a mutual understanding that we have to thrive for and work together to get things done. If you set out on an open sea with an open boat, and you literally like set out into nowhere and you believe the earth is flat, there is a very strong sense of communal and community and sense of collectivism on how to put in the effort together. And what I think is that if we understand the power of the rise of our teammates in the organization, to understand if everyone around me is performing better in the factors that we define as good, then if I want to grow as an individual, the playing field that I am in enables me to grow even further. So this is very evident in team sport. So if all the team players are better players, if I facilitate for them being a part of a collective journey that is bigger than the sum of its part, and I then go back and say, I want to be a leader or I want to strive in this ecosystem, it's kind of like a reinforcement learning model where you serve the common good and they rise and you can rise even more. So I think that basic understanding is something that has gotten lost in terms of management and hierarchies. So I think there is a lot of ancient wisdom to that model. And the interesting part is that my Norwegians, they are not even aware of it themselves. So what is happening now, even after I wrote this book, is that they are starting to look for specialization. They are looking for success models around the world. And I think that's a very, very dangerous path to be on. So if you take a sport like soccer and you go to the Brazilian favelas, you will see a million boys playing soccer 7 hours a day. So you lose a lot. And there's obviously one genius soccer player that comes out of that system. But there are many, many more losers. And that's also in a societal context. So there's not a model that uplifts the whole. Whereas if you're in my hometown of Røros in Norway with 3,500 people, you don't have the input and the volume of talents that you can just avoid everyone else. So this is how the ecosystems, like in Barcelona in soccer, or the same goes obviously for NBA and NFL elite camps, where you can afford to only focus on elite and expertise. But I think moving on, we will get a deeper understanding that with the rise of AI and the access to technology, in particular in the corporate world, coming together, coming back into the office, working together is the only path that can work for a human species to have a role in this technological tsunami that we are still very much in front of.
That sounds like a bit of a blind philosophy because, and the reason I say that, not to ruffle your feathers, and just because it's something I've been wrestling with, how do we get people to move into this collectiveness, collective awareness? And I was actually thinking about that this morning. I read a brochure about people are protesting against some sort of tax that we're going to be implementing. And it was sort of like, well, I don't use those services. Why should I pay taxes for those services? And just like, if I don't have children, why should I pay taxes for somebody else's kids to go to public school? And that kind of sentiment gets replicated all the time. It's sort of, well, especially you see it amplified a lot in the United States with this conflict over things like health insurance. Why should I pay for you when you don't have a great lifestyle kind of thing? So that's why everybody looks after themselves, that sort of individualism thing, whereas society's actually better. And your premise is that when the collective is strong, we all play better, all of us rise. A rising tide lifts all boats, that sort of principle. So this is perhaps the big question. How do we change a worldview? Should we even try?
Mm. No, I like that, and I can totally resonate. But I think this is what we're talking about right here. I think the big challenge in the US and in Europe also is in times of division, we have built a communication model that is built on a rapid, instant reaction based on emotion. Thumbs up, thumbs down. It's a binary way of communicating. And I think the nuances and the things in between, the void, the empty spaces between human beings to fill that with life, that is the challenge. So today we're moving towards some kind of undead reactive society. And it obviously divides into, I don't want to do this. It's just opportunistic. And how do we get out of it? And that's your question. I
Yeah.
think there are two components to that. And that is also for a successful organization. It is to build a culture of trust. Culture is the essence. And having a culture in terms of uniting people. There's a very, and one of my favorite leadership books of all time is from Ed Catmull, Creativity Inc., on how
Yes.
Pixar and Disney built that type of culture. And that is the art of communication, uplifting people and having that sense of we do this together. So that's one side. And the other side is to move from management of command and control and serving people and being right and wrong into a space of leadership. So we lack leaders that are pro something. So it's very easy today to be against paying this and paying that, doing this and doing that, because you cannot be attacked. So you attack because you're insecure. So we need self-secure, self leaders that trust themselves. So when I say that, I think that's the foundation of building that trust, is that we have confident people that can trust in a better future, trust in a better path, trust in the collective effort. And that force for a better future, for progress, that's the essence to me of leadership. So I think those two components, and obviously the cultural part is very tied to education and a deeper philosophy, not what to think, but how to think and then how to act. So I think those two components is something that needs to be invested more in, building cultures and also emphasizing leadership. Because management today is technology. It's about, transparency of tasks and numbers and trying to get to one common ground to stand on, built on knowledge and facts. But the essence of leadership, those that rise out, that uplift people and carry them on and show a path of progress. That is, to me, the way out, and it lacks that in very many aspects of today's society. And we as a species, we were built with an empty storage, and all we have is to try to come up with better explanation and build progress. And if that is stronger, the anticipation or the lust and of progress to move beyond is stronger than the fear of doing something wrong, and then people drive and try to move into that space that we can try to navigate and come together and together be on that path. And that's also the heart of a successful organization, right? It's trust and friction. So if we don't have friction, we cannot progress. And if we don't have trust, we cannot solve the friction. So that to me is built on the two components of culture and leadership. So I think that's the way out. We need more leadership conversations and obviously more leaders that follow that path.
I think I love your optimism and the ethos of upliftment. I think that's beautiful. And I suspect it's rooted in the Viking Code. Could you tell us a little bit about what some of the elements of the Viking Code are?
Sure. But I mean, I just want to comment on that, optimism. So I
Yeah.
choose positivism because I think it's a healthier place to live in and live by. But I'm not a naive optimist. And I see a lot of destructive pessimists. What I really much, in my work in writing and thinking is that I'm in the space that you might be familiar with Professor Hans Rosling, the Gapminder Foundation.
Yeah.
He passed away, I think,
Yeah.
10 years ago, way too early. But he was a lighthouse of inspiration towards a world of possibilism. So he talked about possibilism, and I have used that many occasions because the world is not like it is perceived from media or from X, Twitter, or the world is not like that. And the potentiality of progress through technology, that's the most underestimated force for a better future. So it's a lot about enlightenment and trying to get people to at least think for themselves, to have a plausible explanation for our felt knowledge, our meaning that we relate to. The freedom of speech is important, but coming and having a meaning also come with a very, very high responsibility, and that's the will to truth. So if what Hans Rosling did, he just showed us a world of progress. I mean, Steven Pinker has written a lot about it, and all of these facts that you can look at how things proceed over time, that people are aware of that, then they can move into a state of possibilism that we can solve or at least make some of these problems better. So that's my philosophy of that, positive, optimistic spirit, but it comes from a place of possibilism. So your question was the elements of the Viking Code. So we talked a little bit about that collective part. We have a word in Norwegian called dugnad.
Yeah.
It's kind of like voluntary work without the work part. And that's the Danish hygge was became very famous for their, lively way of living. We also have hygge, but we also have that dugnad. So if I take out the whole essence of like a vaccine and the pandemic, it was a typical for Norway to say either we're all in on this or we're none of us are in on it. So it's like we don't question this. There might be a lot of scientific errors and the world is obviously not perfect, but the general notion is to say that vaccine is a good thing. It has worked for many things over decades. I'm not something that could question it. Of course, we should be cautious and have some kind of skepticism to a lot of things, but this collective ethos to say I buy into that authorities or experts that have spent all their life working on these topics. I said there has to be some fundamental trust in people that try their best. And that's, coming together as a society. And that's the essence of the dugnad. But it could also be about communal services and just helping your neighbors. And that is a very strong part of how individuals have risen by being a part of the collective. Another thing that I write about is what I refer to as micro ambitions. So I'm a strong believer in goals and big visions, but the understanding of progress, that the gold medal, the fortune and the fame is a result of an almost infinite number of small steps. Malcolm Gladwell has simplified this with his 10,000 hour rule and a lot of concepts on how that works. But basically, what I write about is that if you get up in the morning and you have some micro ambitions onto progress during the day, and you have an experience of that in the moment of progress, that is something that fuels your engine for kind of continuous path. And everything in life is compound interest. It compounds into something bigger if you repeat it. It's very obvious with, economic models where you have an interest rate, but that's kind of sort of like health and wealth function. So if we learn how to have that non-reactive path of just, amusing ourselves to death as Neil Postman wrote about. You're just consuming technology and functioning, and we get into an active mode of being micro ambitious. Then we can have an experience of progress. And that is something that is fulfilling. So instead of trying to figure everything out and explaining everything, we strive for progress in the path. So we fill our life with, tangible activities, meaning it's an act of activation, and we get the fulfillment of the experience of progress. And if we repeat that over time, the outcome will be gold medals or fortune or fame or followers or whatever you want to strive for as a measurable achievement. But I had that in my own life. I was an elite athlete. I built my companies, and I never felt success. I was a professional athlete, but I was always striving for that measurable finite goal. And I
What
didn't
sport
have
were you in?
I played team handball. It's a big sport in
Okay.
Europe. Yeah, it's in US. It's not a sport that has really. It's like a mixture like basketball and soccer. You throw the ball into a goal. You have seven players playing against each other. But it's a very honest sport. It has like a aspect of football without the pads, and there is a physical sport, very quick. So it's a good, very good sport. It teaches you a lot about leadership and team play and honesty and values. So but I didn't feel success. And today I can consider myself really successful for myself, because I get up in the morning and learn and experience progress. And that to me, I think, is the most fundamental thing of what it means to be a human being, our conscious experience of our own experience. And that is basically also the liveliness. And if that is a driver, it becomes infinitely strong, because we are very resilient when we are intrinsically motivated to do something. We are high performers per nature. But if everything is a reactive performance, then it becomes very exhausting. And that's why we need our sabbaticals and retreats and get into all of those, trying to figure out shortcuts. So this is the part of understanding the concept of micro ambitions. And those are like two core things of the Viking codes, but we can also get into other aspects when we talk a little bit about maybe organizations or business relations to the Viking code.
Let's do that straight away. So I get this, how this applies directly to self-mastery. So reading through the book, the first part one is basically that. It's the ethos, the Viking Code ethos for individual high performance in amongst a collective ethos. And then the second part of the book, and I was reading it, and when my eyes sprung open, I'm like, wow, this is like application towards the greater social challenges. And in the bridge in the middle is how we put this into play within organizations and how impactful and meaningful could it be. So let's start there. How can we incorporate aspects of the Viking Code for organizational high performance?
Yeah, I think understanding that physical social aspect of it. So I think what we see today in organizations, people are forced back into the office for probably their own best. But I think if the better way, of course, to do it is to show again people the liveliness and the importance of structure and showing up for a training and showing up for the team. So it's very hard to practice basketball or football by doing Zoom sessions, right? So that aspect applies very much so for organizational structures, also in business. So when the pandemic hit, we tore down $1 trillion industry that no one was really aware of. And that was the coffee machine. So so that's where
I think people were
activations
very
start.
aware of missing their coffees.
Now, yeah, but they had the fancy schmancy coffee machine at home, and they
Yeah.
were frustrated and trying to keep, children and spouses calm during
Yeah.
tuning into the next Zoom zombie session, right? Whereas the coffee machine was a lively place where people bumped into each other. So if there
Yeah.
was something awkward, you could speak about it, you could build trust. So coming back to what we talked about earlier, so see, that's the place where you trusted somewhat the foundation of the company that you were working in. So what you see with moving that into the home office, you lose that core trust. The other part is it is a space of ideas, of creation, because people with different views and different mindsets come together and have serendipitous moments to talk about project in an open space that is not timed down to speaking time and 10 minutes or 30 minutes. So we have those sparks of magic of different views coming together in a trusted environments. So many, huge transformations have started and sprung out of those small magical moments where it then builds into like these Gallic villages of force that can change an organization from the inside. So I think the relationship to the Viking Code is here to understand the importance of physical interaction, to talk in a physical space in terms of the nuances, the magic of human beings, where it's non-structured, where there is a coincidental or at least a space where you can go beyond the given and you can play around with ideas. And it's a space where you can show some vulnerability and you can open up. And I think that is the essence of coming and working together in a physical environment. I think that's really, really important. And I think a lot of people don't realize that having a structured day to go into the office and be with the team takes you out of all these challenges being sucked into all the daily activities that hits you when you're at home, or the media or social media or challenges with kids or spouses or whatever. So having that is, I think it's an important realization for many. And I think that is one of the strongest things that to focus on when it comes to organizational performance, is that basically any job you can do at home, a home office work, is literally a part of what AI can do better. I think that's that there aren't many things that you cannot today let go of and put into technology, other than the aspect of coming together and working together as a team and doing that in an organization. So I think these are things that we will realize that what I'm doing at home, basically is AI and technology will eventually be so powerful. So we have to come together and figure out, what can we do beyond in the nuances, in the idea space, and creativity, together. So I think that's the core. Yeah.
I think that the structure of the office is one thing, but I think your secret ingredients come back to that. There's no sense going into the office if the culture is terrible and your leader is awful, and you won't get the magic. You'll get the pain and the power games. So it kind of, we circle back to that core element: is how do we develop
Yeah.
leaders who are who think about impossibilities, who have that sense of upliftment, that purposeful enlivening, and build a culture where that can thrive. So that core ingredient needs to be there too. So there's a lot of people who are on the receiving end of the directive, come back into the office, and it's not an uplifting experience at all. So I think there's that to keep in mind too. There's a lot riding on the leader's shoulders, and there's considerable work to do to create an atmosphere to allow this thriving to occur. Have you got any suggestions for leaders of how to step into that role with grace and excitement?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% resonate with you when it comes to going back to the office on that notion. But I think again, following a Zoom session in the same culture is just as bad, right? So I think that the essence is how can you strive as a leader in such an environment, and what are your things that you can do? I think that the first thing is, of course, to let go of these power structures. So when you sit in on a board meeting in Norway and you come in, you don't know who's the boss. You don't know who's the CEO. You can sit in and you can listen to, and you cannot really figure out who runs this company, right? And I think that is to understand that if you work with people, you have some basic rules. So when you come to a meeting and you sit together, you should all be prepared. You should be on time. You should respect. You should build that culture of mutual respect. But then when you get into that space, what leaders do is that they facilitate for others to grow. And I think that there are times where you need to make decisions, but the decisions are better if you have listened to the people around you. So I think these type of core leadership skills that a lot of theories show that they should be a part of your toolbox, that is becomes very important. I think one thing that I very much see as a core driver of this is that today, when we are so busy with the technology, just being there with human beings, showing that you're in the conversation, just to give people a sense of relationship to a physical being. I think that's just a very simple truth that starts a leader's journey. I talked about self-trust, to practice self-trust. I think that's very important. I see a lot of these overplayed insecurities that are power plays of managers that build hierarchies. I think that's just hiding insecurity. I
Can you tell
think
me a little
another
bit
thing,
about, explain that a little bit more, please, Anders, about how do you
yeah,
build self-trust?
yeah, I think that is the whole essence of vulnerability. So, if there are things that you don't get in today's society, politicians are wonderful at trying to explain everything, where every skilled person understand they have no clue what they're talking about. So vulnerability, and I think Brené Brown is one of the masters of explaining this as the core leadership skill, is that vulnerability is the birthplace of creation and innovation. So if you come to me with some kind of new quantum tech breakthrough and I have no idea what you're talking about, and I am in front of a group of people, I want to look strong. I don't want to come across as non-competent in that field. A manager, an insecure person, would say, yeah, sure, and he would get into some riff and then drift off in some direction. A leader that dares to embrace vulnerability would say, "Oh, I'm sorry. I am not, educated on this topic, so I don't think we can have a good conversation now. Let me go back home and prepare, and I'll read up on this, and I'll come back tomorrow, and we can talk on somewhat of an eye level to figure out where we can take this in the organization." You show your vulnerability. You have that awkward intuition that it feels really awkward. To buy into that feeling, to lean in to that particular feeling, that to me is a birthplace of building self-trust. You are self-trust that you will work hard to figure it out. And I resonate with, I think I picked up many years ago, that we are not experts in this society. We are professional amateurs. So a leader is a professional amateur. He works hard, he puts in the effort, he's there for the team, but he's always in a space of learning. He's learning, he's a learner, and he's an amateur. He has that beginner's mind that you learn from Zen Buddhism to Shozin. That's the essence of, having a strong self-trust. And that is the birthplace of, relationship and trusting others. So I hope that kind of sort of answer your question on how I see that trust part and how you can practice it. Just go after that go into those vulnerable spaces and practice speaking up if you're not comfortable in speaking in front of audiences. Try new things. Go to those. I used to joke about it, to build that trust, to dare to do stuff, and basically, I don't know, it's just an anecdote to see if go to the borders of your comfort zone. You pee into the wind or look into the barrel of a gun or
Don't
whatever you
pee
want to
into the
risk.
wind.
No, no, but if
Terrible
that is,
advice.
yeah, well, that's that. Then you will have experiences, right? No, I was just saying
We
that the
don't need that one.
liveliness. No, we don't need that. But no, but the path of of daring how to get out of your comfort zone and to try new things. That is the essence of building self-trust. So if there are things that you are afraid of, like and those would be examples of that, and you really want to try it, then you get the experience and you figure out this is not a good thing to do. But anyhow, I think this is just getting out of your comfort zone and not trying to be so important all the time and taking yourself to that high level of importance. I think that is a very, very good advice to start to build self-trust.
Perfect. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Anders. Now, are you ready for the fast three?
Yes, I'm ready for the fast three.
All right, here we go. What is the future technology you most want right now?
I'm very curious about quantum tech. I'm invested in quantum tech, and progress in the field of quantum computing and quantum technology is something I'm very, very curious about. So that's something that I want to see.
Okay, just slight tangent. How is there progress there, or is it still a pie in the sky thing?
Yeah, I mean, there are very many approaches to building quantum computers, and there is definitely progress. But again, I think we are also very, very far away from a very stable quantum computer that can uphold the challenges of having enough qubit to really do something of high complexity. And these are special purpose machines. But again, history has showed over and over again, hype and overestimated, then the disappointment comes in, and then there are some breakthroughs, and
And
then things
breakthroughs.
happen. Yeah, but
Okay.
on the different note here, it's not just about quantum computing. It's about, quantum sensoring, quantum algorithms, using hybrid solutions and functions of quantum theory to do actual tangible stuff. So there's a lot of things. One is that it's very, very important at the moment is, the whole space of quantum cryptography and the security aspect. And the US has
Yeah.
just, given out the core standards, and there are patents and things. So if anyone bets on a quantum computer sometime down the road, then we have an immediate security risk. And already today, there are quantum algorithms that can solve this, and they need to be implemented so that data that is stolen today could eventually, with a quantum computer, be decrypted, obviously. The need is immediate, and here already there are solutions to implement quantum algorithms and cryptography into the ecosystems that we have. So yeah, there are many
Wow.
aspects to this.
Okay, that's a rabbit hole I have yet to explore. So that's cool. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, yeah,
Number
yes.
two, what's the best tip you ever received for leadership?
Yeah, I think coming back to what I said about, the learning path. So and I can't remember who gave it to me, but it's stayed with me forever. And it's, if you are interested, you become interesting. And we
Mm,
love interesting people. We love interesting, things. So if someone is interested in you and really interested in, what you do, what you can, you become interesting. And we start to follow these people and we share with these people. So if I'm interested in all the people around me, I get all the new updates, I get the new technologies, I get the best expert to share with me. And that's the role of a leader, to be interested, and you will become interesting.
love it. Number three, what are you reading or listening to right now?
Yeah, so over the years I've read a lot of thick books and philosophy, and I loved having that, essence of reading. And I must confess that even myself, as a person that loves writing, I have stopped reading to a much broader extent than I thought was
Gosh.
imaginable. Yeah. No, but I haven't stopped reading to that full extent. I still read books, but it's not that I read, like, sit down with one book and I finish. So I read up on ideas, and I go in and I use the book in a very different term. I get concepts, and then I use AI to supplement and to learn. So the whole essence of sitting down and reading a book, and that's why I think, when I wrote the Viking Code, as you said, the book is a very, very broad book, but it's very, like, chunked down to things in readable bits that you can get into. So there's a lot of things to learn. You can go into a chapter, you can read in different paths. So that's something that I've unconsciously so gotten involved with. But I'm just reading a physical book about mythologies, and I've dug into Göbekli Tepe in the East Turkey as the cradle of humanity. So I'm reading because I'm writing a book about the unification of mythology and enlightenment. So I'm reading on mythology. Right now I'm with Stephen Fry's book on mythology and trying to take out some essence of how stories are created and what stories means to us and what might be the implications of taking out the fiction in science fiction, taking out the story and the folklore in our society, and that's a very interesting topic. So I'm reading a thick book by Stephen Fry on mythology at the moment.
Awesome. That's terrific. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that was the Fast Three. I love that you're exploring the fiction and the science fiction. I'm a science fiction novelist. I've got 3 novels out and my 4th on the way. And I
Wow.
explore a lot about meaning and story and the future in those novels. So we're in line. And I'll
Do
pick up. I haven't read the Stephen Fry's mythology, but I think I'm going to add it.
but how do you see that? I'm curious. I mean,
Mhm.
do you has it become harder to come up with fiction? Because I mean, if you think about writing a fiction book or
Mhm.
producing a film, and you're going to go on with that, and you're going to do it, and you have to work for a couple of years, what kind of future can one imagine today that might not be overhauled within the next 2, 3 days? You see,
Mhm.
that was the basic idea of I write. I've also written a book called Singularity Paradox that is finished and will be out next year with a quantum physicist friend of mine. And what we talk about is sci-fi, but they call it science philosophy. So
Uh-huh.
we have taken the phi part into PHI instead of the fiction. And one of the arguments here is that AI, growing into artificial general intelligence, moving towards some kind of singularity, everything we can imagine is then theoretically already there or theoretically very easy to build.
Mhm.
So I'm just playing with that, and I think if I were to come up with a future fictive scenario, I'm having a hard time not seeing it as a realistic path, in terms of like much
Yes.
faster and through technology. I don't know how you see it, but that's how I.
It's probably the purpose of my work is slightly different. It's not to imagine the future all by itself. It's to take a question and then to imagine that into the future. So the questions that I started with in terms of my novel writing was what kind of future are we going to have and what kind of leadership do we need now moving into the future? So I play around with different aspects of leadership and put them into these high pressure different uh, worlds that are created in my fiction to see how people might problem solve their way out of it. So I'm more interested in that side of things
Mhm.
than a futuristic society potentially. Um, so I take your point, like, and my books are set in the near future, so they're not 10,000 years into the future. As it's more probabilistic than possibilistic, I guess, in terms of the way that I've built them. So I'm taking some technologies that are already in development, such as computer brain interfaces, such as artificial intelligence and humanoid robots, and those all appear in the future. So I'm kind of just leading people gently along into the very near future, as opposed
Mhm.
to building a completely new society. Now, my last novel in the series might be a little bit different because they're going to be on Mars, and that's a little bit further out. And I think there's more possibilities to imagine a utopian society. My current
Mhm.
novels are a bit more dystopian. So, a utopian version where you can start to create new environments. So, you can imagine a new economy, you can imagine a new political structure, all that kind of stuff. Um,
Mhm.
so, which is probably more in line with your science philosophy idea is what kind of principles can we imagine into the future and how would that structure society? Did that answer your question, or did I just go off
Yeah, no,
on a
no, no,
different
no, no,
angle?
no, no. No. I think it was a good path because, yeah, I agree with you. Mars is a little bit further off, but I think you talk about brain-machine interface and merging with technology. Is there
Mm,
a point where we have the same conversation and the lights are on, but there are no one home to perceive them? So we would build a wonderful Martian society built based on this model, but there is no human being that perceives this very achievement of building. It's an undead society. It's a new form of existentialism. Like we are
mm,
creating some kind of Homo obsoletus, a human that has merged with technology, and no
mm,
one can understand that because obviously I cannot talk about your consciousness. I can only say that it feels like something for me. I have some kind of self experience, a qualia, as they call in philosophy, but I cannot talk of other forms of consciousness. So that's to me, if the technology emerges, if you replace an arm or a leg or
mm,
the chemical scum that Stephen
mm,
Hawking called it, our body, we replace that and we go into some kind of other state, and then we take all the neurons and we replace all the neurons, and eventually we have some kind of simulation, and we have ideas and thoughts coming in from the cloud, and we have infinite access to knowledge. What does that do with our perception? We can build
mm.
wonderful human, it's like can create all of these wonderful societies, but does it matter? Is there someone there to perceive it? And those are like those, science philosophy related to fiction scenarios that I
Yeah.
like playing with because they're probably, to some extent, much closer than we can imagine. Having
Mm,
a fully functioning humanoid,
mm.
mechanically speaking, with a artificial general intelligence is probably not like 1,000 years away, right? So,
That's right.
so it's probably something that we have to get, you know,
We need to
come a
experiment with it through fiction.
yeah,
It helps us work out what could possibly work and what could possibly not work. And that's the what you're describing, that merging with technology, is definitely what I play around with the brain computer interface in my work. It's called a think link. It's
a
basically
think link,
embedded in the
yeah,
cortex. And for the person or the character who gets that embedded, Xanthi, she changes as a result of this,
yeah,
because she becomes one with the AI, even though the AI has a separate consciousness sort of within her brain. So it's I'm still
interesting.
playing with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we
Okay.
wrote about artificial human intelligence in Singularity Paradox next year, and we take that exact path to say what will
Mm,
happen with our conscious experiences. So we argue that we are as a species we have come a long ways. We have 8 billion of us. We kind of sort of still get along. It kind of sort of has progressed. So maybe it's a good sense to have a humanoid and a super intelligence entity to have some kind of relatable human experience consciousness program into it, because it would then behave intentionally like human beings and not as an optimization machine. And those type of scenarios we play a little bit within in those scenarios that we relate back to what is actually technology achievable of
mm.
doing by applying quantum AI or whatever. So that's a very interesting field to explore, and something that probably both of us will have some surprises over the next 10 years only.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's definitely on my radar to be interested in that. And as
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the time, and oh my God, we've had such a rich conversation. Is there anything left unsaid that you'd like to share with the audience before I wrap us all up?
Yeah, maybe the skill that we haven't touched upon, anticipating future scenarios, is a good wrap up to what you said. One of the lacking skills of leaders today is anticipate plausible scenarios. So we are living in a time where we have exponential growth in technology for the past 80 years, ever since the first computer of Konrad Zuse in 1937 or whatever. Why should it stop? Why should breakthroughs in science and technology stop today? So if you look at the curve of the exponential growth, what do we think is plausible will happen in the next 10 years? And this is something that I cannot get my brain around, that leaders in politics and in business are arguing about future technologies, be capacities of batteries, access to storage of sun energy or wind energy. What do we think is plausible that will happen? And I'm very often surprised that we look at studies of the past instead of anticipating the future. I just came off a conference where I asked the head of sustainability of Lufthansa, Porsche, and Adidas about what you think will happen with future human behavior. Do you think we will have humanoids at home? Yes, they all said. Do you think they will take care of children, teach them stuff? Every, school will have every student will have their own teacher, someone that takes care of the mom, whatever. You get a relationship to this robot. When you go on holiday, do you turn it off and put it in your suitcase, or does it sit next to you in the plane? I bet you a lot that can afford it will buy tickets. We'll have an increase on ticket sales. Do they all look the same, or do they get a haircut? Do they get Adidas sneakers? Do they put on a Hugo Boss suit? Do we have that strive for aesthetics, for individualism? Why shouldn't we, get our own individual humanoids? And I looked at him. We're sitting here and talking about reducing consumption, but you all anticipate that consumption will go up. So what are the path that we are following when it comes to ecology and sustainability then? Is it, thing that we can try to reduce, or should we speed up technological progress? Because that is the most likely scenario that human beings will follow. And they all looked at me and said, well, yeah, so we haven't thought about this. And I said, yeah, well, you should. You're in business, right? So the anticipation of future scenarios, when you just think about, what will happen? Will my smartphone go back to a Nokia 5110 playing Snake and having no internet access? Or will it continue and start to merge with my brain? And what does that mean? That to me is a riddle why leaders does not anticipate future to that extent, to the most plausible. And my prediction to end it off is that I think that the marginal costs of energy will drop towards zero in the next 10 to 12 years. The biggest risk for businesses and leaders and the economy in the US and in Europe, in particular German, is not the too high energy cost, but too low energy cost. So you will not be competitive. Sustainability will all be about effective and efficient uses of resources. If you're not efficient, you will not make any money. So ecology equals economy equals capitalism, which leads us back to where we started, progress. And I think that is the strongest advice that I could give to leaders today is to try to anticipate the power of technology if you want to build sustainable business models.
Thank you. And I think the other element to that is, with the whole caveat, how will human behavior adapt or stay the same? Because that's the factor that will skew one possibility or another.
As long as we're conscious, we probably stay pretty much the same.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Anders. You've been very generous with your insights and your wisdom. I really appreciate it. Where can people find out more about you and your work?
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and I have a lot of articles and resources building on andersinset.com on my website. You can subscribe to a newsletter there, or you can follow me on LinkedIn, where we are building more and more articles and videos. There is also a YouTube channel coming out in short, but andersinset.com will be the place where you can find the access to all the things that I'm doing.
Awesome. Well, I will be sure to be signing up and following your work. I've really enjoyed it so far, and I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Zoe. Thank you. All the best to you.
It's Read to Lead, and I have 2 books for you this week on helping us to unpack and change our thinking around power. The first one is by Anders Indset and is called The Viking Code. And it really takes a look at the Nordic philosophy of collectivism and how, when we show up for the team, all of us get better. And I think this is a lovely look at how circle concepts of power applies into team dynamics and our personal responsibility to others as we show up at work, at sports, and in life in general. So that's The Viking Code by Anders Indset. It's a great personal success philosophy, as well as strategy of how this notion can transform everything from government to education to economies. Yeah, it's a really good mental workout for you. The second one is called Going Horizontal by Samantha Slate. Sam has been on the show previously. And I love this book because it's talking about flattening hierarchies and how we can go about building collaborative practices in the workplace. Basically, how do we bring circles into the workplace and reduce the challenges and the traps that come with having too many triangles of command and control type of power. All right, the Viking Code and going horizontal is what I recommend for you this week. That's it for the show this week. It was an interesting, wild one. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit subscribe on whatever platform that you're listening to, whatever app you're in. If you feel like it, please give us a rating and a review. That also helps boost our visibility and gets these ideas and concepts into more people's hands and minds, because when we have better leaders, we have a better world. And there were some awesome ideas in the show today. You might also consider becoming a podcast insider. If you go to zoerouth.com, click on podcast, you can sign up to get the extra bonus goodies that come with each and every episode, including an implementation checklist, some discussion questions so you can have really great, juicy conversations with your team members and friends, and interesting factoids to make you look very smart and intellectual at dinner parties or just in general. So that's how you can become a podcast insider. Sign up on the website. Take our relationship to the next level. I'm ready. Are you ready? I think we can do it. In the meantime, also feel free to sing out to me at zoe@zoerouth.com or make a comment on social media. I would love to hear from you. It makes it more of a conversation. And together we can explore the nitty-gritty and juicy bits of the conversations. In the meantime, live with grace, lead in service, live well, lead well.